continuing lectures on Introduction to Sociology. My name is Dr. Fauzia Mohammed, and on this part we shall discuss or learn more about society and culture. So by the end of this lecture series, we shall have looked at what society is, including its various definitions and the types of society that are recognized by sociologists. We shall also look at culture and some of the elements of culture, and finally we shall try to have a summary of what we have learned today. The learning objectives: by the end of this lecture, you will be able to define and to understand what society is. You will also be able to understand what culture is and some of its important elements. You will also understand the different societies that are found within the global society, as well as to appreciate their cultures and the differences in these cultures and what makes these societies important for sociologists. Now, society has been defined by many sociologists or many scholars in different ways, but I particularly like Houghton and Hunt's definition that says that society is a relatively independent, self-perpetuating human group which occupies a territory. Remember when we were talking about the elements of society with sociology, we talked about territory and the geographical location. And culture also, and society also shares a culture, and it also has associations within a group or groups. So in a nutshell, most sociologists agree that society is a group of people with common territory who have interactions of various levels, and they also share a culture. Now let us look at how some of the classical sociologists viewed or understood the concept of society. If we begin with Auguste Comte, most of you will recall we said that Auguste Comte was the father of sociology. Auguste Comte saw society as a social organism possessing a harmony of structure and function, while Emile Durkheim treated society as a reality in its own right. Moreover, Talcott Parsons saw society as a total complex of human relationships, while Maurice Ginsberg, for him, society is a collection of individuals united by relations or modes of behavior which mark them off as being different from others who do not share the same or similar relations or behaviors. Now, some of the basic concepts of society include, we've seen that the term society is derived from the Latin word socius. If we recall, sociology in itself is also derived from the same word, Latin word socius, which means companionship or friendship. So the two primary components of society are, one, its culture, and secondly, its social structure. So simply put, society is a large grouping that shares three important aspects or three important components, and these include the geographical territory, secondly, a common culture and social structure, and third, people of groupings within this who share this common geographical territory as well as common culture also are expected to abide by some of the laws that are found within these cultures. Aristotle, centuries ago, said that man is a social animal. Therefore, man needs society for the attainment of his optimum happiness and where he can work and enjoy his life. Society may be illustrated as an economic, social infrastructure made of various or varied collection of individuals. Remember, we talked about various groupings. And members of a society may be different, or they may also come from different ethnic groups. For example, if we talk about the Tanzanian society is made up of people or groupings of people who have more than 120 ethnic groups. So let's look at some of the characteristics of a society. In order for sociologists to acknowledge a set of people, a group of people as a society, it needs to have some of these various characteristics. First, it has to consist of people. We say that society consists of people. So society is composed of people. Without people, there is no society. Since there will be no social relations and no social life from which society is understood or seen or can be observed. And within this group of people, that's where you can find issues like mutual awareness and mutual interaction, whereby society is a group of people in continuous interaction with each other. A social interaction is possible because of the mutual awareness that people have with each other within the geographical territory or small groupings that there are, or even ethnic groups, as we said earlier. Therefore, society is a network of social interactions who have some similarities or likeness, which is essential for them to be aware of each other and hence to form a society. The second characteristic is that society exists among those who resemble one another, either in body, in mind, or to a certain extent. Just like birds of a feather flock together, therefore, men that have similar things or have things in common are implicitly also said to be in some sort of society, because they have, within these similarities, there's something that binds them together. Society rests in also differences, not only similarities, but also differences. If men were exactly alike, and their social relationships would be very, very limited, they would differ in terms of their, but we also know that men differ in terms of their looks, in terms of their personality, in terms of their abilities, their talents, attitudes, aptitudes, interests, tastes, even faith. But sometimes these differences are what holds the society together. The third characteristic of society is that there has to be cooperation and division of labor within the society. This includes assigning of each group or each specific characterization a specific task. Let's look at the banking institute or the banking society as an example. You see that when you walk into a bank, you'd find that there's a counter self-service that has certain specific tasks. There's also the accountancy department. You have the security personnel who will be helping people and making sure that everything is working according to plan. But also, if you walk into a bank hoping to find a loan, you'll probably be made to attach with a loan officer who will help you in whatever regards that you want in a bank. But all these activities, all these tasks put together make up the banking service, so to speak. So society functions also on interdependency within each other or within different issues or different characteristics or different things that are needed within this entity of people who have similarities, but they also have differences, and these differences, sometimes the interdependency between them also makes them to be a unity or a unit or a society. For example, even when you talk about a family, within a family you'll find their parents who have their particular set of tasks. There'll be children who would have their particular sets of tasks. But even within children, there'll be brothers and sisters who would have different interdependency relationship. There will sometimes be extended members of the family, such as grandparents, aunts, uncles, and neighbors. Name any that you wish. So within a family setting, you can also see the interdependency between a society. So today, not only are individuals interdependent on one another, but sometimes you find even communities and social groupings or even nations are interdependent on one another. The fourth characteristics of society is that society is dynamic. Society is dynamic, it is not static, which means it is changing, and changeability is an inherent quality of human beings. No society can even remain constant for a lengthy period of time, because changes may either take place slowly and gradually, or sometimes even suddenly and abruptly. And the fifth characteristic of society is that there is the issue of social control. Absolute freedom makes man's life like that of any other animal out there. So society has its own ways of controlling the behavior of its members. For this, society has either formal or informal means of social control. The informal means of social control include issues like customs, traditions, the norms and the values that are found within these cultures. These act towards making having a script of do's and don'ts, so that the members within this society know where the boundaries are, what is required, what is accepted, and what is not. And when you look at the formal means of social control, these include issues like the laws that are put in place, sometimes even the police. And when we talk about the issue of maybe a country, we also have a constitution that is place to ensure social control within their society, and in this case within the Tanzanian society. So having looked at the characteristics of a society, now let's turn to some of the types of societies that sociologists have been trying to study over the years in order to understand the changes that are happening, to understand how culture is important to the whole sociological fabric. If we begin with the first type of society, this is the hunting and gathering society, whereby within this society, there was food was obtained mainly through a combination of hunting, trapping, collecting shellfish, fishing and collecting edible plants material. They were just hunters and gatherers. If you remember back to some of the history societies, we are told these are those old societies where even some of they didn't even have enough tools to work with, so they depended totally on nature for their food. Then moving on, we have the horticultural societies. These are the societies whereby, because of the development of technology, remember we said that man is constantly changing and evolving. This was the time when they had very rudimental tools, and they used those tools to ensure that they could grow crops on the land, and most of the time they would slash and burn this land in order to grow food, and these were the horticultural societies. The third type of society that sociologists are interested about or interested on are the agricultural societies. Now, these are the societies whereby, due to advancement in technology and this advancement also led to ensuring that now they were, instead of using rudimentary tools to grow and to find their food. Now they had the plows, for example, where they could really till the land and grow food. And this is also a time when, because due to the advancement of technology, there was also a surplus within their food productivity. And this is also a time when there was a little bit of a complex system of social stratification, whereby people are no longer depending on the same types of activities. There was a high division of labor, and then people were starting to move into permanent cities and urban areas. If you can recall to the talk that we had on the development of sociology, particularly with the effects of the Industrial Revolution. The fourth type of society is the industrial society. Now, this type of societies emerged following the Industrial Revolution. The industrial societies combined science and technology with the utilization of energy to run machines. And these are sort of more advanced, more highly skilled and specialized societies, whereby also their means of interaction is more fragmented as compared to the other types of society, where there was still unity at a larger scale. And fifth, we have the post-industrial societies. These are the ones that are characterized by the use of electronic manipulation and transmission of information, particularly the use of radio and television, including the computers, technological advancement that are associated with the post-industrial society, which is also one which has a lot of many societies with a lot of skilled laborers, with a lot of differentiation within such societies. Now, those were societies. Now we'll turn our focus on the culture. Why is culture important? Remember, when we started talking about sociology in the first part, we said that some of the important concepts for sociologists include society as well as culture. So, culture can be defined as a total of knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors shared by and passed on by members of a specific group. Culture acts as a blueprint for how a group or people should behave if they want to fit in within the group. And culture also ties one group and separates it from other groups, and it also helps to solve problems that sometimes human beings find themselves facing. When a group shares a geographical region, a sense of identity, it is said to be a culture, and that culture can be observed or seen within a society. Within a culture, there could also be ethnic groups, which simply refer to a group that share language or even customs, and sometimes even common heritage. An ethnic group has an identity as a separate group of people within a region. For example, we can talk about the African region. However, within the African region, say if you look at the South African part of the southern part of Africa, you will find maybe the Sans or the Bushmen who occupy the Kalahari Desert. These are people who have their specific territory, the Kalahari Desert. They speak their own language. They have a social organization that is really distinct and different from other groups within Africa, for example. Now, culture can be seen or is obtained within the following sectors or issues or things. Within food and shelter, for example, certain cultures eat certain food. For example, as you know, if we look at the example of Tanzania, we know that in the northern part, the Chaga people's culture is to have to take banana as their staple food. But that is also maybe can be found within the culture of the higher people, for example. And when you talk about shelter, you can find, for example, when you look at the Maasai, they have a certain way of constructing their homes or their houses, the manyatas, which are really different and distinct compared to other cultures that are found within Tanzania. Education. Within South cultures, there are a lot of educational attributes or aspects that are taught and passed on from one generation to another. And sometimes it's also religion. For example, when you find Muslims, they will have certain symbols and attire and ways of dressing that will automatically tell you that these are people that belong to a certain religion in this particular aspect, the Islamic religion, as even compared to some of the Catholics. For example, the Catholic nuns, they also have something that will tell them apart as being people that belong to a certain culture. There's also the issue of security and protection. Sometimes there's political and social ways that will tell you and show you the differences within cultures, and also families and other organizations, and particularly language. For example, the Kiswahili language that unifies the culture of people that are said to be people that came out or are found within the Indian Ocean and the coast regions of East Africa. Culture is also the pattern of human activity and symbols. Sometimes natural environments also greatly affect the lifestyle of people in a region, thereby shaping their culture. The diversity in cultures around the world is also a result of the mindsets of people living within different regions of the world. So why do we place so much importance on culture? We find as sociologists culture to be important because of various reasons. One, because of the cultural values. The cultural values are the ones that give an identity to the community. The community gains a character and a personality from its culture, from the culture of its people. Culture is shared by the members of a community, and it is also learned and passed on from older generations to the newer ones. For effective cultural transfer, it has to be translated into symbols. Language, art, religion serve as some of the symbols or symbolic means of transfer of cultural values between generations. The second importance of culture is that culture is something that binds people together. It ties people of a region or a community together. It is therefore a common bond. Customs and traditions that people follow, and the festivals they celebrate, the clothing they wear, the food they eat, and the cultural values that they adhere to all tend to bind them together as a people or a society or a group that is distinct from others, so to speak. Cultural values develop a sense of belonging and feeling of unity for people of a particular culture. People of culture share traditions and ideologies, and they have a similar way of thinking and living. And if they belong to the same religion, they also tend to share the same belief system. And further, all of these attributes act as a binder or something that binds these people together, hence the importance of culture. Now, let's look at some of the attributes or characteristics of culture. Though culture varies across different parts of the globe, they share certain characteristics that are basic elements that may remain the same or remain consistent within these cultures. The first is that it is a system of social control. Cultural values form a form of principles of one's life. They influence one's principles and the philosophy of living. In a sense, they impact our way of living, and thus they affect our social life. Sometimes you may do things thinking that this is how these things are generally done, thinking it is the human way, human nature of doing things, but actually these are things that are, because they are learned and they are repeated and they are things that you do every day, you tend to take them for granted, but that is also a form of social control that tells you that this is acceptable, this is not, and this is how you should live your life. The second attribute or characteristic of culture is that culture is learned. It is learned through experience. Members of a culture share ideals that are important, and they are impacted to future generations from older generations. Therefore, culture is passed on through language, art, or even literature. That's why when a kid or a child is born, we say that they are born without a culture, but this child will learn the culture through their parents, through their siblings, through their natural environment. They'll start to learn the language, they will start to learn how things are done, the literature and the arts, such that this, if this child maybe is of Tanzanian origin and was born maybe in a different set of territorial and geographical setting, maybe let's say in the Western Hemisphere, this child will learn that culture from there because that is what they are interacting with most of the time. And then they will come to learn these other things later, and so on and so forth. The third characteristic or attribute of culture is that it changes. And these changes can either be gradual or they can also sometimes be abrupt and sudden. So we know that some traditions and some beliefs and some rituals have already been eliminated from the language and the mannerisms of our people as compared to how they used to be maybe a few years ago. For example, if we take a 50 or 40 years ago, it was okay to beat and spank a child as a way of teaching this child mannerisms. But now we find that beating of children is scorned upon because it's looked at as something that is, backward and something that really needs to change. So these changes contribute to the formation of a multicultural society and even sometimes leads to development of new cultures. And the fourth attribute or characteristic of culture is that culture is essential. Why do we say culture is essential? Cultural values and belief systems dictate our thinking and our behavior. So rituals, traditions, and who we are as a human being is influenced by the culture we belong to. Culture is essential to make us part of the group and to give us the guiding principles of life. So in summary, we have talked many things about society, about culture. So well, in this lesson, what have we learned today? We have learned and discussed the concept of society and culture, and we've seen how these two components have been used by sociologists to explain various issues in regards to understanding the human development, the human being, where we came from and where we're going, and to also understand why they act the way they do, and some of the things that inhibit them from doing things like other people would do. And hence, giving or understanding the meaning behind the actions that they do, behind the things that they do, and to see how much culture and society relate with each other and depend on each other. We also discussed the 5 different characteristics and also the 5 different types of societies. And we looked at culture and its importance both in differentiating societies as well as in binding communities and also acting as a symbol of social control. Among its central qualities is that it is a form of social control, establishing boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not, and its essential role is providing guidance and principles of life as we know it. So the next lesson, we shall look at issues of socialization, social organization, and social change. Thank you for your attention.